For over 2 decades, if you talked about competitive StarCraft BroodWar, you were really just talking about one country, South Korea. Seriously, the skill level there was on another planet. It was so high it created this incredible global story of underdogs, innovators, and, well, legends who dared to challenge them. This is their story.
Yeah, that skill gap was so massive, it literally created its own vocabulary for the game. If you weren't Korean, you were a foreigner. And believe me, that wasn't just a label, it was this constant reminder of the huge mountain you had to climb. And that's really the central conflict that makes these players' stories so compelling.
But right from the start, a few players proved that foreigner didn't have to mean second best. Nope, they were the pioneers, the ones who showed the rest of the world what was actually possible.
And you just can't talk about pioneers without starting with maybe the most iconic one of all, the Canadian Protoss player Guillaume Patry. This guy wasn't just good for a foreigner. For a moment in time, he was the best player in the world, period. One. Just one. That's the number of foreigners who have ever won an OSL, the on-game net Star League. We're talking the most prestigious, most legendary tournament in BroodWar history. And that one person, it was BroodWar, all the way back in 2000. It's a record that has stood for over 2 decades, and honestly, it's pretty likely it'll never be broken.
So let's move on to our next pioneer, Bertrand Elki Grospellier, a Terran phenom from France. He was another absolute beast in the early scene. You also had guys like Rekrul, who were some of the very first non-Koreans to actually pack up and move to Korea to compete in their absolutely brutal pro circuit.
Elki's resume was just incredible. He was a professional in Korea. He made it to the finals of both the OSL and the World Cyber Games. For a while there, he was a player that even the top-tier Koreans absolutely did not want to face. And then, kind of at the height of his career, he just stopped. Elki completely changed gears, left StarCraft, and went into professional poker. And get this, he became one of the most successful players in the world, winning millions of dollars. A true legend in 2 completely different games. How crazy is that?
Now, this foreign talent wasn't just a handful of one-off prodigies from random places. In fact, one small country in particular produced a shocking amount of top-tier talent. We're talking about Bulgaria.
The guy leading the charge for Bulgaria was Christian Beast Drexler. He snagged a bronze medal at the 2004 World Cyber Games and was invited to this exclusive Blizzard tournament for the best players on Earth. For a good while, you could make a very real argument that he was the best foreigner on the entire planet.
And right behind Beast was Ivan Lammer-Velikov, a Terran known for this really solid and honestly suffocating style of play. He wasn't flashy, he didn't take silly risks, he just methodically squeezed the life out of his opponents. He ran the Bulgarian scene for years and even got a top 16 finish at the WCG in 2008. So this all brings us to the big question, right? How on earth did they do it? You know, without the pro gaming houses, without the coaches, without that insane training infrastructure that Korea had, how did these guys compete? Well, the answer was creativity.
This slide really lays it all out. The Korean meta was like a surgeon's scalpel. It was all about mechanical precision, perfect timings, a script that they drilled thousands of times. The foreigners, well, they knew they couldn't win that game, so they threw the script out. They turned the game into a messy, unpredictable brawl where pure creativity could find an opening. A great example of this was the Man-Zerg style. Instead of the delicate Mutalis control that dominated Korea, they just went with these big, beefy armies of Hydralisks and Lurkers. It wasn't always better, but it was unfamiliar, and sometimes that's all you need.
And a perfect example of this creativity was the German Zerg player Christoph Mondragon Semke. His entire style was basically built around one signature move that turned chaos into a weapon.
Okay, so here's the key thing to understand. The Zergling run-by wasn't about fighting the main Protoss army head-on. That slow, powerful deathball? No way. The goal was to avoid it. Mondragon would use the speed of his Zerglings to just zip right past the enemy's defenses and attack their economy from behind. This would force that slow Protoss army to turn around and come all the way back, buying Mondragon precious time to build up his own economy. It was basically asymmetric warfare inside StarCraft.
Another one of these master tacticians was Grzegorz Draco Matusiak from Poland. He was one of the very few foreigners to actually get official pro gamer status in Korea, and he did it during one of the toughest eras of competition.
And while a lot of foreigners relied on strategy to make up for mechanics, Draco was kind of an exception. The guy was lightning fast. His peak actions per minute, or APM, was reportedly around 500. He had the brilliant game sense and the raw speed to keep up with anyone.
But not everybody specialized like that. Our last tactician, another Canadian, Nick Testy Pernantis, found his edge by doing the exact opposite. He embraced radical versatility.
I mean, think about it. In a game where most players spend thousands of hours mastering just one race, Testy was a monster with all three. He'd compete at the highest level playing random, which meant his opponent had no idea which race he was about to face. That sheer unpredictability was his weapon, and he used it to take down some major Korean pros, like Midas.
Now eventually, that mechanical skill gap between Korea and the rest of the world, it just became almost impossible to bridge. But the wins and losses, they don't tell the whole story of what these players actually left behind.
Grrr. He proved that the impossible was, in fact, possible by winning a title that no foreigner has even touched since.
Elki and Rekro, they proved that foreigners could break into the very heart of the Korean pro scene and stand on its biggest stages.
Beast and Lamer showed why greatness could come from absolutely anywhere, and they put an entire nation on the competitive map all by themselves. And Mondragon, Draco, and Testy, they showed that there is more than one way to play this beautiful game, contributing brand new strategies and ideas that made StarCraft richer for everyone.
You know, this really gets to the heart of their legacy. They weren't just finding little workarounds to beat the system. They were making real, genuine contributions to the game's strategic depth. They proved that even on a playing field that was far from even, creativity and just a different way of thinking could forge absolute legends.